I'm just going to give you guys kind of a short little background just about me so you kind of understand. And you know, a lot of times people are like, I'm either too young, too old, or whatever it happens to be with all of this. But I have been in the fitness industry for over 25 years. So when I went to high school, did an anatomy class, I was like, you know, I love everything about how the body works, how it moves, and I want to know everything about it. So from there, I went into college and got my degree in exercise physiology and then my master's in sports medicine because I just loved that through nutrition you can make such a big difference in your body and everything that you do. And so I continued through doing all of the training and understanding this. In the flip side of it, I was a dancer, so I competed in competitive bodybuilding as a pro bodybuilder. I did Arnold Schwarzenegger's bodybuilding show, so I had lots of fun doing that. You know, so was always in, you know, the fitness industry, the fitness light, looking at everything and doing things. And when I hit 35, things started to change. And I was like, things are changing and things seem different. And you know, it was always understanding the protein and the carbs and the fats and how it all works together. And you know, I was always helping people lose weight or get buff, or, you know, I had a lot of competitors that actually, you know, after they got done competing, they wanted to get pregnant. And so going along through that, you know, everything was great. And then we moved here in 2017 from Virginia. And I was 39 years old and I found myself really depressed and really in a spot that I was like, you know, I'm really not liking everything that's going on. And I remember it was right before my 40th birthday. I went into the doctor's office and I had found myself, I was 20 pounds overweight. And I was doing all the same stuff that I had been doing. I was doing the high protein, I was doing the lower carbohydrates, and I was doing all the stuff. And I said, what the hell gives? I'm like, I don't understand this. Like, I don't understand. I'm doing everything. I'm doing all the workouts. I'm doing the HIIT training, the cardio, the strength training. Like, I'm doing everything and nothing is working. And so I said, test everything. Test all the hormones, test everything. And they're like, well, you're kind of a little young to test your hormones. So that's the first thing. Doesn't matter if you're 40, 35, doctors really don't want to test your hormones. I'll tell you why in a second. So they test all my hormones and they come back and they go, everything is normal. And I said, that's great. I still feel like crap. And so they said, well, there's really not much that we can do because if we look at your hormones, your estrogen is in a normal range. You'll understand why in a second why I said that. Your progesterone is in a normal range. Your FSH, which is your follicle stimulating hormone, is in a normal range. So everything's in a normal range, so there's really nothing we can do for you. I said, okay. I don't like that answer. I said, so we're gonna figure this out. At this point, my business partner, so I'm 40, she's 45, she had early onset menopause, so as of today I'm 46 and I am postmenopausal. So I have already hit that marker and am in and beyond into menopause. So knowing, you know, the average age for women to go into menopause is 52, you know, I knew, I was like, there's something here that I've got to do differently. And so, you know, I started looking at stuff, I started doing all the research. It's how our 21-day detox was born, because I said there's different ways that we need to reset the hormones. And then from there it went on to our hormone solution, which is now our one-on-one coaching 3-month program. Because I realized when we do the 21-day detox, sometimes you don't need just a reset. We need an entire 180 overhaul in how you're doing your nutrition. But so I went back to that same doctor a year later and I was 25 pounds lighter, and I went in and my blood pressure was better. But the thing is, my hormones were still normal. My estrogen was still normal, my progesterone was still normal. What wasn't normal though, was the things that had changed is if you looked at my estrogen range, I was now in an optimal estrogen range. If you looked at progesterone, I was now in an optimal progesterone range. The other key things that we didn't necessarily talk about is a lot of times when women think about hormones, we think estrogen and progesterone. So I do a lot to educate women and say those are not your only two hormones. 90% of the time when somebody is having infertility issues or struggling to get pregnant, or that's where they're going, it's not because of estrogen and progesterone. It's mainly because of one of the other hormones and the effect that they've done on your estrogen and progesterone. And so when we get older, those other hormones play a factor. So if we start to look at hormones just in general for estrogen and progesterone, and she's gonna kill me because she's here. But so if I think 15-year-old, right, you know, having a normal regular cycle and everything, they go about, so you have your follicle stimulating hormone, it's going to increase the estrogen so that the estrogen is coming up, it's getting ready for that egg to release, and then when that egg releases, that's when you ovulate, so the egg is gonna drop down into those fallopian tubes for you in order to get pregnant. So then that is when either, you know, the egg is fertilized and then you become pregnant, or if you don't and that egg basically just disintegrates and goes out of your body, that is the elevation in progesterone. So if we think about women in general, your estrogen goes like this, and then your progesterone goes like this and it takes over. So that's that natural ebb and flow in terms of how the body works. Now, as we start to think about menopause for a second, I'll explain this and then we'll talk about how the other hormones play into a factor. So when we think about menopause, the very first thing that happens is your follicle stimulating hormone goes up, because now all of a sudden you're not having those normal cycles. So the body isn't doing the estrogen and progesterone. So the first thing that goes is the follicle stimulating hormone keeps telling your body, produce an egg, produce an egg, produce an egg. But as we get closer to menopause, what happens is we're firing one egg, and then we go a couple months and we don't fire an egg, and then we fire another egg. So remember when I said when the egg isn't fertilized and it goes down, that's when that progesterone goes in your body. So progesterone is, if you think about it, it's the ice. It's calming. It makes you feel nice and calm and relaxed. So that is what progesterone does. So what is usually the number one symptom of menopause? Hot flashes. Estrogen is the fire. So when we think about it, for women that are not hit menopause, estrogen is a massive fat burner. Most people don't think of it that way. They think of estrogen as, oh, I get so bloated and my stomach's so fat and oh, this estrogen, but actually estrogen is a fat burner. It lubricates your joints, it helps your muscles, it helps your heart muscle, it helps your bones. So estrogen does all those fat burning properties. But what happens is, so the estrogen comes, the progesterone comes, the whole cycle repeats. When that estrogen when the progesterone doesn't come, the body says, oh, I must make more estrogen because there's not enough progesterone, so I must be doing something wrong because there's no egg releasing. And so the estrogen goes up and the estrogen goes up. And so this is what happens when we end up in estrogen dominance. Estrogen dominance can happen when you're younger and say you're having fertility issues. It can also happen that as we hit menopause. So we're having this issue where our estrogen is too high. When our estrogen is too high, we start to have hot flashes, we have the night sweats, we start to have the brain fog, so we have all these other things going on in our body. Now the tie-in here, as we start to talk about these, is when we look at estrogen, there's other factors in our body that can increase our estrogen. So this is where I talk to people a lot of times about nutrition, because when we look at, if they do hormone replacement therapy, we're just gonna put in more estrogen or we're gonna put in more progesterone, whichever one you're missing, we're gonna put either one of those in. It's not gonna be exactly what the body makes, so it may not necessarily have anything going on. That might be fine, but what I find is so many women is when they get on hormone replacement therapy, their fertility issues. For example, I have a client right now, she's a detective, she has a very stressful job. They have actually said she's progesterone deficient, and so they started putting in progesterone in her body. When she talked to me, I said, every single symptom that you have is estrogen dominance. And I said, yes, you can have the progesterone that's gonna balance it, but that's not gonna make a difference. So if we put those aside for a second, I'm sure you all have heard about when you've talked about keto or intermittent fasting or going sugar-free. So do we know which hormone that's targeting when everybody's talking about that?
No.
So the main driver of all of that is insulin. So if you hear them talking about insulin, so I'm gonna talk about three major hormones: your insulin, your thyroid, and your cortisol. So what I like to say is your estrogen and progesterone are your sex hormones. So those are our sex hormones for females. That's what keeps everything going. That's what makes you have that normal cycle and keeps going. Insulin, if we have too much sugar in our body, or if our insulin is not working the right way, we become insulin resistant. When estrogen and progesterone start doing this way, there's a direct correlation that they have found between estrogen dominance, so as soon as that progesterone starts to come down, and insulin. If we don't balance our insulin, it doesn't matter what's going on over here with progesterone, and estrogen, we're never gonna feel balanced. So we have to get that insulin balanced. So big ones is insulin. So insulin is going to be regulating your sugar. If you are feeling tired all the time, if at 3 o'clock in the afternoon you're like, I need something, I need coffee, I need sugar, I need something to keep going, those are key factors that you're insulin resistant. And what I'll do too is, if you want, after this you can give me your email, I'll send you a free quiz. The free quiz actually walks through, I don't actually tell you which ones they are, but I have you just go through the quiz to see which one of the hormones are the issues, because a lot of your side effects can tell me which one are the issues. But when we start to look at those, so insulin can make all of that. The other thing that we're gonna find for women, if you find as we go into menopausal years, when we find this belly And so we've got the belly and the gut that just won't go away. That is from insulin. So that is insulin resistance. So the next one we talk about is your thyroid. Your thyroid is all about your energy sources. So how energy are you? How active are you? Thyroid is also going to be, you're going to feel sluggish. You're going to feel tired. It's also another one of those major metabolism hormones that if your thyroid is off, it's going to be almost impossible to get pregnant, because that thyroid hormone is going to dictate the estrogen and progesterone. So what I'm trying to show you is that all of these hormones go together. There's like a lock and key in terms of how they go together. So that's where we find the thyroid. Then the next one is cortisol. So cortisol is one of those, if you find yourself, the easiest way to say, I say for cortisol is if you're tired but wired. If you are so tired all day long and then you lay down on the pillow and you're like, why can't I go to sleep? Now my eyes are wide open and I can't go to sleep. That's usually cortisol imbalance. What I find for most women when we're hitting menopause is that your cortisol, which should naturally rise in the morning, so when you get up it should rise, your cortisol should elevate to get you up out of bed, get you going. For a lot of menopausal women, cortisol is low in the morning. So you get out of bed and you're like crawling to get out of bed and you're like, I need my coffee and I need to get going. Then the cortisol will come midway in the middle of the day, which is exactly what it should do. But then for a lot of menopausal women, it's way high in the evening. And so that's why you can't go to sleep. It's the same thing that I find when women are coming to me saying they're having a really hard time getting pregnant, is that cortisol is really high. Now cortisol is one of those that yes, you can be tested for cortisol, but let me tell you exactly why a lot of these things aren't tested. Because remember how I said that normal range? So for your insulin, that normal range is really, really big. It can be anywhere from 0 to 5.6 on your A1C. If it's 5.7, then you drop over into prediabetes. But it's really, really big range. So if we talk about thyroid, your thyroid again has a really big range. And if you're low on thyroid, you're gonna feel really, really tired. If your thyroid is high, you're gonna have way too much energy and keep going. But if you're really close to that low marker and they say you're fine, you still feel like crap. So, and then there's that direct inverse relationship between your thyroid and your estrogen. And then again, cortisol usually, in order for you to test cortisol, you actually have to take a test. It's a saliva-based test. You have to take it over an entire week. So it's getting up in the morning, you have to spit in the thing. You take another vial in the middle of the day, you have to spit in it. You take it dinner time, you have to spit in it, and then again, before you go to bed and spit in it. It has to be done over an entire week. So the best analogy that I've ever heard about, I'll explain the hormone testing for a second. So at any given moment, your hormones change. So if you think about it, if you're a woman that's naturally cycling, your hormones are constantly changing. The reason why most people will not do a hormone test, the only time they'll do a hormone test for you, basically, when you're pregnant, because they're looking for HCG, and they're looking to see what are the estrogen and progesterone levels when you're pregnancy, to confirm pregnancy. Because with the HCG, and if that estrogen is doubling, then they know, okay, it's a viable pregnancy, because that estrogen should start doubling over. The other time that they can test your blood for hormones is when you're postmenopause. They can do a test that says, yep, you have 0 estrogen, 0 progesterone, you are beyond menopause. So it's those two ones. So if we think about your hormones for a second, what they think of is think of a tube of toothpaste. Think of a brand new tube of toothpaste. You know how like when you squeeze on that toothpaste and it's brand new, it comes out nice and smooth and it's really easy, right? So that is how your hormones are supposed to operate. Now, if we think about if you have a hormone imbalance, so let's say you don't have estrogen or progesterone, you know how you're squeezing on the tube and nothing is coming out when it's down to the very end? That is menopause. So you're squeezing and squeezing and squeezing, and your body is trying so hard to get that estrogen and progesterone to work. So all the other hormones are going crazy because it's saying, if we can just get this to work, and if we can squeeze this out, we'll feel better again. Now, what's right in between that, when everything is really psycho and crazy, and especially for women in the 10 years before they hit menopause, you know when you take the tube of toothpaste and you're squeezing and squeezing and all of a sudden it goes and it goes everywhere? That is what happens when your hormones are a mess. This is why if you take a test, it's really hard to tell your hormones, because they can all of a sudden squirt out or they can just be a little bit. So what that wraps back into, and I'm going to get to all of these different ones for those of you that walked in. So I'd asked before if there were specific things that they wanted to talk about and address with hormones and how they play into different things with different hormones. So key basis is, I will say, pregnancy and menopause. So I'll tell you a really, really cool thing about your brain and how this goes on. So when we look at the brain of women, we think about the brain goes through different cycles in terms of it gets ready for pregnancy. So there's changes in your brain to get ready for pregnancy. When you hit menopause, there's changes in your brain that actually shut down all those neural pathways that you needed to be turned on for pregnancy. And so it's really cool because when looking at some of the research and talking to women all the time, because you can imagine if I'm talking to women that are perimenopausal and menopausal, most of them are reaching out and being like, my life is over, this sucks, my hormones are shot. Like in Japanese, so the word that they use for menopause is kaneki. It means renewed energy. So they say that, when your hormones are done, it's a revival of women because you get to basically put aside taking care of everybody, because by the time women hit menopause, most people are out of your way and you can finally focus on you. And so they've done, scientific studies where they put electrodes on, and they show that all of a sudden your brain can actually turn on for more productivity. So if you think about the reason why these days there's so much more of a focus on hormones is because our life expectancy didn't used to be 90 or 100, right? I was listening to a podcast and it said, well, you live a third of your life post-menopause. And I'm sitting here going, I'm 46 years old. I really hope I'm only not going to live 22 more years, because that would be really sad. So what we're finding is women are living almost half of their life. So there's so much research going on that shows when estrogen and progesterone bottom out, how do we make a difference in that? So a couple things that we're going to talk about exactly. So whether I am talking to you about getting pregnant, whether I'm talking to you about perimenopause or menopause, that is basically all of those. The thing they have in common is that your estrogen and your progesterone are going crazy. They're out of whack. They're not communicating the right way with your body. Your body's got all kinds of other things going on. But the best way to navigate those is to look at all of your other hormones. How do we get those hormones in balance? Because if all those other hormones are balanced, then what we have left over is your estrogen and progesterone we can look at. So that's exactly what I tell women when they're struggling with fertility, weight loss, any kind of perimenopause or menopause hormones. Let's fix your nutrition first. Let's make sure that you're eating right and you're getting all that proper stuff. Then go get your hormones tested. Because then they can really see if you come into them and you say, this is what I'm eating. So we'll just use you for a second, Jessica. If you go into them, they may say, she mentioned she wanted to know about hormones and pregnancy. You go in and say, I want to get pregnant and I'm trying to do this. They're probably going to go back, or this is the kicker, you'll get this in perimenopause or menopause, because they'll say, okay, well, I understand that you're having hot flashes or you're having issues with this. I think you should probably eat less and you should probably exercise more and you should probably lose some weight and then things will get better, right? That's usually every time they do. So what I give women is they walk in and they go, nope, because look, I'm doing this. I'm coming once a week and I'm using these amazing machines and they're working on my strength training and I'm, playing pickleball a couple other days a week, or I'm going for a nice long walk with the dog, and oh, by the way, here's my nutrition. Then all of a sudden they look at you and go, oh, okay, so you've taken care of all these other hormones. Now we've really got to figure out what the problem is. So it's the same thing, because whether you're for hormone replacement or you don't want hormone replacement therapy, it's the same thing. I always tell women, see if you can fix things first before you get the hormone replacement therapy, because the consensus with hormone replacement therapy right now is you should take it when the symptoms are the worst for the shortest duration possible. So that's exactly what you experienced, right? Because now you're at the point where they're like, okay, you're done, we're taking you away, right?
Yeah, 55, because they said that would be my normal menopause, so
right.
they took it away from.
Right.
I
So,
think 2 years.
okay. And you see, and nowadays they're showing, there's more and more research that if you have had a hysterectomy and you no longer have your uterus, that some women actually benefit from staying on estrogen for the rest of their life.
I've been reading about that, yeah.
Because the thing is people don't understand, estrogen isn't just your ovaries. For women, estrogen is in our brains, it's in all of our joints, and so that makes a huge difference. It's also in all of our muscles, it's also part of our gut health. So when you start to remove estrogen, one of the biggest risk factors without having estrogen, and if you go through early menopause, is the fact that your heart and your bones. Those are the most critical for women. So what do we do in replace? So a couple things, I'll give you 3 big nutrition takeaways that if you do these 3 nutrition takeaways, I always tell people they're so hard and they're difficult to do, but if you do these 3 nutrition takeaways, it will make such a huge difference in your life. So the first thing though that we have to get to is because we need to talk about carbs, proteins, and fats. Because I always break this down so that people understand the difference. Because when I say carbs, people are like, oh, carbs, bad, right? Because everybody says carbs are bad, you can't eat carbs. But, so if we take broccoli for a second, and Alex, you can't answer, is broccoli a carb, a protein, or a fat?
Carb and protein.
And protein. I think it's a carb.
So the reason why, so carbs, it's because carbs are traditionally bad, right? People think that carbs are bad. Is there anyone here that's a vegan? Okay, so you'll understand why I say that. Carbs are anything that grow from the ground. So any kind of plant that grows from the ground is a carbohydrate. All your fruits, all your vegetables, all your grains, they are all carbohydrates. Proteins are anything with a face. So your fish, your chicken, your pork, your beef, those are all proteins. That's why I always ask fish vegans in the room, because otherwise I really offend them. Now, when we talk about fats, fats are going to be, when you look at them, they are either going to come from a plant source or an animal source. So that's where those fats kind of come as the, they're kind of the hybrid of either of them. So if we look at peanut butter would technically be a carbohydrate because it grows from the ground. But when you get 2 tablespoons of peanut butter, it is going to be 6 grams of carbs, 6 grams of protein, and 16 grams of fat. So therefore, it gets qualified as the fat. So if we look at those different ones, same thing with avocados. Why are avocados said to be such a great healthy fat? Because an avocado is packed with fiber. So that's the biggest difference between some of those. Now, when we look at carbohydrates, they can be very, very different. So rule number 1 is to keep your added sugar less than 20 grams a day. So you will hear me say, I'm not going to tell you don't eat carbs. I'm not going to tell you, keep these carbs at a certain super, super low spot, but it is actually your sugar that's going to make a big difference. So in a perfect world, I would have women eating breakfast, lunch, and dinner, or lunch, a snack, and dinner. Because of intermittent fasting, we'll get into intermittent fasting in just a second because people always have questions about it. But I would have you eating 3 meals, kind of like if we think about when I was a kid, 40 years ago when I grew up, it was breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And do you remember breakfast, lunch, and dinner? My breakfast was a bowl of cereal with milk, and my lunch was a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and my dinner had a glass of milk, because food isn't what it used to be anymore. So there's all that aspect of food. If you ever want to go more into that, I can go more in depth into food, but food has drastically changed. But so, I don't want you eating in between your meals. The main reason why is because I want your insulin balanced. If your insulin is going like this throughout the day, that is when you are going to have the most amount of issues because of the fact of that sugar. And so if the insulin is going like this, remember what I tied insulin to? It's insulin goes right into estrogen dominance. And so estrogen dominance is going to make you gain weight, it's going to make you be moody, it's going to make you have hot flashes, it's going to make it hard to get pregnant, it's going to have all of those issues if we go estrogen dominant. So insulin is definitely one of those that we want to make sure that we're focusing on. So 20 grams of added sugar. Now you will be shocked if you go home and start looking at the backs of your jars of pasta sauce and your peanut butters, and I love it when people are like, oh, I got my peanut butter from Trader Joe's, it's gotta be great. I'm like, Trader Joe's peanut butter, the second ingredient is powdered sugar. So you really have to start looking at those labels. Yeah?
So we're not counting fruit sugar, right? Like if I'm eating tomatoes or berries, I'm counting like if I have honey or clean sugar or, right?
You'd want to actually count all the sugar. So we'll talk,
even fruit sugar.
Yeah, we'll talk about fruit in a second. So fruit, so that people understand, fruit is 100% sugar. So difference between a banana and 2 tablespoons of white sugar. The only difference between them is that the banana actually has vitamins and minerals. That's it. Because the banana has 33 grams of sugar and the 2 tablespoons has 33 grams of sugar. So I definitely give people, and I would say, if you follow my Instagram and my Facebook, I put this stuff out there all the time. I always tell people, my best free stuff, best stuff is always free. It's always out there. The hardest part is the accountability of doing all this. So making sure you do this. But reducing, so remember, I didn't say carbs. I did not say carbohydrates. I said your sugar. Naturally, if you reduce your sugar and you're going under 20 grams of sugar, you're all of a sudden going to be eating better quality carbohydrates because they don't have all the added sugar. So if you take Rao's pasta sauce versus Prego, I can't eat Prego pasta sauce anymore because to me it tastes like it's sweetened pasta sauce because there's so much added sugar to it. So make sure you're looking at the added grams of sugar. If you want fruit, then this is what I always tell my clients. You add that fruit in as your sugar. So on a daily basis, like for breakfast, I will usually have coffee with almond milk in it, and I put in a tiny bit of a barista blend of almond milk that has a tiny bit of real cane sugar in it. So that's part of my sugar. Then if I want to do like, I do a coconut or an almond milk yogurt bowl, I'll put in a little bit of berries. And then I usually have somewhere 2 pieces of dark chocolate. That maxes out that 20 grams of sugar. So then, you know, everything else that I'm doing, I don't have that sugar in there. But it makes a huge difference. I will tell you, if I want to have a hot flash tonight, all I have to do is eat dessert. And I will have a massive hot flash at night. I will be sitting there and everything will be an inferno and it will turn on. So that is really the key, is balancing that insulin is going to make a huge difference in estrogen and progesterone. Okay? So wine is going to be, if you have a 6-ounce glass of wine, that's 15 grams of sugar. So I tell people about alcohol. So this is one of the big things that I teach in both of my programs when I work with individuals is how do you bring that wine in. So that is going to go to rule number 2. So rule number 2 is never have a carbohydrate by itself. Okay, remember wine is a carbohydrate, so that'll be easy because wine is grapes that grow from the ground. So if we think about, again, carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. The problem with carbohydrates if you eat them by themselves, so have you guys heard about the glycemic index? So the glycemic index is how fast a food is going to come in and adjust, you know, your blood sugar. If you're keeping your blood sugar, if you're doing that under 20 grams of sugar a day, that blood sugar level, that's what directly ties to your insulin. So that's going to be a factor. If you eat carbohydrates by themselves, you immediately spike that insulin up, and then what happens is it comes crashing right back down. So think of if you ever had just fruit for breakfast, and all of a sudden you eat the fruit and you're really, really, really hungry again, that's because your insulin went right up and it came back down. So how do you do that? So if you're gonna have, you know, a piece of bread, put an avocado on it, put peanut butter on it. So you wanna think about mixing those two together. So it's gotta have that carbohydrate with a protein or a fat because it's gonna reduce how that body is going to be affected by blood sugar.
Cheese, wine cheese.
So, and cheese is dairy, so cheese would be it's gonna be your fat and your protein.
So having a piece of celery is having carbohydrates.
Yes. But celery is kind of in its own little ballgame because celery, it actually, you burn more calories digesting the piece of celery. But the celery by itself is going to, if you eat just celery by itself, it's gonna jack up your insulin because it's just carbohydrates. So you gotta be careful when you put peanut butter in it. So you put the peanut butter in it. The best, I always tell people the best hack for peanut butter, if you have a Costco membership, get the organic Costco peanut butter. It is literally nuts and salts, that's it. You also, I mean, that is the best peanut butter when you think about nut butter, nuts and salt. You don't need any added oils, there's enough oil in peanut butter. Same thing with almond butter, it should be almonds and salt, that's it. So if we think about that glass of wine, what I always tell people, from this rule, in terms of never eat a carbohydrate by itself, when you go out and you have a special treat, I always tell people it's either wine or dessert, it's never both. So if you're going out for a nice dinner, what I always tell people, if you want to have your wine, if your goal is weight loss or hormone balance, you're going to have that glass of wine after you've had your meat and your vegetables, and you're going to have it with it. You're not going to have it by itself. So that would be the biggest key right there, is making sure that you're having it with it. And it is your carbohydrate for that meal. So that's the key.
What about being able to have more because you're gonna exercise harder that day? Does it matter?
If you are an athlete, I would say yes.
Okay.
If you're not necessarily an athlete, like if you're the general female, you wanna make sure that you're fueled properly, but it's more along the lines of, you know, even the night before. It's the same thing when I worked with professional athletes. I would literally get them along the same path of what they're eating, and then the day before, their race or whatever they did, we would take the exact same foods that they had been eating and we would just up them a little bit so that they would have them. I mean, most of the athletes that I worked with, except for the lady that was training for the Ironman, they weren't even using extra stuff because they didn't need extra stuff. It was more of the extra real fuel. And really it gets into, you need to be doing like a 2-hour, very intense exercise about during that time.
I'm just trying to get more wine in there.
Like different kinds of alcohol. Like I was hearing that what you're saying about tequila as being like an easier alcohol to process, like for your body, and like no sugar or something.
They all turn into sugar,
Yeah,
unfortunately.
all of it.
They all turn into sugar. Yeah, there's some of them that they will say in like a keto diet are more friendly, but it's still gonna do the same thing. If you have it by itself, it's directly turning into sugar. And most of it depends on the types of alcohols. So if you think about it, a lot of the alcohols are done from something that's gonna process into like a fructose sugar, which is harder for the liver to digest. I always tell people, if you want the best drink, so if you're like, okay, Corey, I hear you, I want the very, very best drink, you're gonna get vodka that is made from potatoes. You're gonna mix it with a seltzer water and then do a twist of lime or lemon in it. And that is gonna be your ultimate best one for you.
And ladies, Chopin is potato vodka.
Okay, so we've kind of talked about those 2 rules, right? So the first rule was
Less than 20 grams a day.
20 grams a day of sugar, and the second one was, okay,
What was number 3?
And then three meals a day.
yes,
No snacks. Keep your no snacking.
yes. So the third rule, so there's a lot of different rules, but this is the rule that I like the most, is you gotta keep moving. You've got to keep moving. Now, I am not gonna tell you that you have to exercise and do HIIT exercise and you have to exercise like this crazy feat. You just have to keep your body moving. If your body is not moving, it's gonna stop moving for you. So, that's one of the reasons why I love what Jen and Ian do here, because I will say 98% of the women that I work with are busy working professionals, and they're like, how do I balance my kids and my job and everything else that I've got to do? So I always tell people, start with a walk. Start with a walk. And people will be like, I can't do a 30-minute walk. I'm like, great, go out and do a 5-minute walk. And then do a 5-minute walk in the evening. They show that the best workout for your hormones, so for hormone balance, is walking and strength training. Those are the 2 best ones you can do. So, and it just depends. I have women that are like, I need to work out 4 days a week because I need the stress reduction. Okay, go for it. But then at the same time, I have women that are like, I can't do that, I can't do that. I'm like, well, you don't have a solution. You don't have an option because there's something that you can do once a week. So it's keep your body moving, because if you stop moving, things stop working. So we talk about like gut health for a moment. So gut health is tied in really well to hormones. The number one reason why people have bad issues with their gut is because they stop moving. Your gut needs to be moving so that it will move along things really well. There's a lot of research that talks about the gut and everything that goes on with the hormones and how the 2 of them are interacted. So if we get those hormones really moving, then we can make a difference there. So I'm gonna give you a couple little bonus ones. So in terms of, we talk about insulin. So for thyroid health, this is like kind of a bonus or rule 4.0 or whatever, would be, lately you've seen probably in the supermarkets that a lot of things are going grain-free. So I would say if you are struggling with hormone issues, or if you're struggling with weight loss, or you're struggling with like, 1 minute you're like, I'm fine, and the next minute you're like, get out of my way or I'm gonna kill you. Like kind of like moods going like this, drop the wheat and drop the corn. So drop those 2, drop those processed grains. So those are the most commonly processed grains in the United States, is wheat and corn. Those are gonna be your big ones. And then cortisol, if we look at cortisol for a second, it would also be, look at the amount of caffeine that you're consuming and your stress levels. If that caffeine is, really, if you're doing a lot of caffeine, I remember when I had hit 40, and Stacia, my business partner, said, okay, we're gonna do this detox, and this is what we're gonna focus on. And we were the girls that every time we run bodybuilding shows together now, and we would go out after the bodybuilding shows and we would sit down to eat, and I could go to the bathroom or she could go to the bathroom, and when we came back, it would already be set there. I would have a Diet Coke, and we would already have told the waitress that we're getting the brownie for dessert, and she would already have, you know, a drink. And so, and then every morning in the show, it was like, we gotta go to Starbucks, we gotta get the coffee. So we knew what they were, and so when we started doing all this research and started reaching out to the OBGYNs and talking about hormones and saying, look, you know, it is so not exercise more and eat less, it's not eat more protein and less carbohydrates, it's not what people are doing when they're younger to lose weight. Things are changing when your hormones are the problem. And time again, they're like, no alcohol, you gotta drop your coffee, and you've gotta drop your sweets. And I go, there's no way. There's no way. There is no way. And so we designed, so I will tell you, I always say, I don't sugarcoat it literally. In the 21-day detox, you absolutely are gonna give up your alcohol, you are gonna give up your sugar, and you are gonna give up your caffeine. Because you have to figure out the effect that they have on your body. And I almost said no and walked away from it all. Because I was
But
like,
only for 21 days.
yes. But I was like, I can't give up coffee for 10 days. I was like, I can't give up coffee for 10 days. There's no way I can give up coffee for 10 days. And I almost walked away from it. And I remember we were at a soccer tournament. My husband's like, I'm gonna go get some iced coffee. You want some iced coffee? And it's like 90 degrees outside. I was like, I can't have coffee. And I was like ready to kill him. But it was the most eye-opening thing, because what I find for most women is we are walking around in a state of inflammation. So your body is chronically inflamed. When you step on the scale, so I was listening to these girls one day in the locker room, and they were in there and they were like, I've been working out, I've been dieting all week, and I've been doing so great, and we went out to dinner last night and pizza, and I gained 5 pounds. Ruined all the weight loss I've been doing. It's all gone. One night, it's all gone. And I wanted to walk up to her and go, honey, you didn't gain 5 pounds of fat overnight. So if you have a weight, and let's say it says 150, and the next day you step on the scale and it says 156, you did not gain 6 pounds of fat overnight. What you have is 5 to 6 pounds of pure inflammation. And so when I work with clients, I always tell people you can do anything for 21 days. And it is life-changing when people are like, they have babies. I had a lady that literally, she had gone 5 years, tried every single IVF treatment, and she said, okay, fine, I'm gonna do bodybuilding. Let's get into bodybuilding. And I said, okay, we're gonna do this hormone reset first, and then this is the way we're gonna do. And then, you know, we got towards, she had 3 weeks left for the show, and I was like, I don't know why you can't lose any weight. Like, there's something going on. And she calls me, she goes, Corey, I'm 12 weeks pregnant. She said, but she didn't do anything because, you know, she'd been not, she was like, we've tried and tried and tried and tried, and I gave it. And she's like, I totally gave up. So, you know, when I hear those stories, or I hear, you know, the lady that contacted me and she's been struggling, she's been working with a registered dietitian, and she's been working with, you know, the entire police department fitness routine, and desperately trying to lose 20 pounds that she put on, you know, in a year, and she's like, I can't figure out how to get it off. And they had her on a list of supplements that was this long. There were so many supplements that she was taking. I said, you gotta get off all the supplements, you've gotta do this 21-day detox, we've gotta do this. In 3 weeks, she lost 12 pounds. Because her body was inflamed. It had nothing to do with the fact that it was 12 pounds of body fat. But when your hormones are all messed up, your body just holds on to all this water. So what I do when I work with women on the 21-day detox, and it's, by the way, it's very successful for men too. Men see all of a sudden their testosterone is up. They're a bit hornier because their testosterone is up, so I'm warning you of that. But a lot of women will do it with their husbands because they just bring everybody along. Your kids can do it too. If you've got kids at home, your kids can do it because it's real food. But what we're doing is we're basically taking out all the kinds of inflammatory processed stuff in your body, and we've got a clean slate. And then we get done with the clean slate, then we figure out what is the issue. Is it dairy? Is it your cheese? Is it the sugar? Is it conventional red meat? Is there, you know, what is it that's actually causing the problems? And generally what most people walk away with is, I can eat all of this, but I just can't eat these 2 things, because these 2 things are what totally mess with my hormones. And so what I like to say is I give food freedom back to people, because all of a sudden now they have this opportunity to do all this stuff, which makes it really, really nice. So if we look at, so we kind of talked about all of these different ones. So all those rules I gave you, will help pregnancy, weight loss, mood, and menopause. So now I'm gonna turn it over to questions. And I'm gonna stop this video real quick, so that way